welcome to Two Lads for the Scheme. I'm Aidan Martin.
And I'm Mark Deans.
You're Ally Robertson.
One lad for the scheme.
One lad for the scheme. Or can we swear in it? Can we swear in this podcast?
No, not allowed to swear. I promise I will only swear. I got told that at CDN when I done my presentation. Please do not swear.
I was going to repeat the thing you were talking about earlier, one good person.
All right, yeah. Well, you could say that, yeah.
Ally said there's always one good cunt, you know.
Yeah.
They help you in your life.
See, he swore, I didn't swear.
I swore to start off. We're going to be talking about creativity as a coping mechanism, and we'll just hear a back and forth to 3 years. So I'll just put it out there first. Like, when did you first realise you were creative?
Okay. I don't really know, to be honest. I was wee. Started off drawing probably on just like cheap paper with pens, through art when I was at primary school and art at high school. Always made music. Started that when I was like 12 or 13-year-old as well. And then when I moved back to my mum's when I was in my late 20s, I probably took up art and I've never stopped.
I would suggest that, cause we obviously you live in Ladywell.
Yeah.
We grew up in Ladywell at a time when we boys didn't grow their hair long or anything like that because you just couldn't. And you were always dyeing your hair different colours.
Yeah.
You're the only person I knew that was brave enough to do anything with his hair. That's the first time I remember your creativity.
Yeah, it's a bit of self-expression, I think. When Craig Burley dyed his hair in 1998, that's when I started dyeing mine. It just never stopped.
It's a role model.
I think, I think that is probably a means of creativity, I think. Like being able to dye your hair or just change the way you look, especially in a time, like you say, when there was nobody else doing it.
In an environment where I feel it was suppressed to be creative, you had the guts to be an individual. Because we all had the Gaza, right? The Gaza blonde hair, the Craig Burley blonde hair. I'd done the blonde hair, but I never dyed my hair pink or green or all the mad colours that you had your hair.
I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I think I dyed my hair black, but that's because I was a goth. But for about 20 minutes. And then
when did you realise you were creative, Ally?
Probably, I don't know. I think I grew. My dad he loved taking photographs, and that always sticks in my mind. But he done stuff in the Second World War that he showed me, and it was quite. I suppose that sparked it in me at an early age, but I never really followed it up. I was more motivated for sort of getting out of school, getting a job, and having an illustrious career, I suppose, and all different things. And then about 6 years ago, I had decided to come back to college because people kept saying to me, your photographs are all right. They're not quite what they need to be. And I'm a great person for taking criticism now and again. I say that very liberally. But and I thought to myself, you know what? I've just came out had a really bad sort of 4-year experience with an operation that nearly killed me. I thought, that'd be a good thing, change of direction. So about 6 years ago, I came to this college as a student. I met my lecturers. At the time, there was 3 here. There was Alan McGregor, who's really a big inspiration on my life. Keith Brame, who his monotone voice used to send me to sleep all the time in class, but knows his stuff about photographs. And Neil Sinclair, who's still a lecturer here, who we all kind of have a joke with, and we make out that he's not the most creative person to be teaching a creative industries course, but that's just a personal joke. But I learnt from all these people that within me I had creativity, and it was bringing that out and just showing it and having ideas. And I think that sparked something in me about 6 years ago that just made me more creative, and I started thinking about, I could be a filmmaker, yes, I could do that. And it's having that impotence to take yourself forward and having a wee bit confidence in yourself and building strategies when things didn't work. And I think that's really important, is that not everything works first time for you. You go back and you revisit ideas and you redo ideas to the best of your ability. And I kind of stick within the media sort of fold. I like photography, filmmaking, music, all kind of like, to me, they would say new genres. I spoke with Mark about painting. The closest I get to painting is like emulsion. So that's that. That's but the way AIs have moved forward, I'm now being able to create art Not me. The AI's creating art. I'm just.
So you're
guiding
part
it.
of the process, right?
I'm part of that process. I'm part of the imagination part of that process. My imagination is coming up with it, but it's then the AI's fulfilling what my imagination's believing it to be.
Yeah.
So that's the tricky AI. It does all the lifting for you, and it's just somebody explained it to me, it's just a reasonable answer to a valid question.
Take us back to the lecturers though, because lecturers were a huge part of my journey.
Yep.
And I'm in the creative industry now. And I didn't start out that way, but the lecturers I had at the college played such an important role in my life that for me, they gave me self-belief. And they gave me nurture. And then I went on to the path of ended up in the creative industry.
Yeah.
You had 3 different lecturers you mentioned there that were involved in the creative industry. Were there any key things that they taught you, whether it was academic or otherwise?
Yeah, I think learning things like composition, all the elements that go around an image was so important to me because I could do an image but I didn't quite understand why it was working. And then they kind of put all the jigsaw pieces in for me. So it's like, yeah, that's composition, that's rule of thirds. Oh shit, that's rule of thirds. And I kind of got that. And then I kind of learned the history of photography as well, which I really like. If I'm going to learn about a subject, I like to learn how that subject came about. And Alan McGregor was so pivotal for me for learning that side of it. And we got taught in the darkroom here. I was like, when I came, I was expecting digital photography. And then I don't know, I kind of was disappointed the first week. I was like, God, I'm going to have to do film photography. And I suddenly realised it doesn't matter what medium it is, you're getting taught how to do it properly. And that's one of a lot of people I hear, a lot of people when they go to filmmaking things, they talk about, I went to college but I never really learned anything. But you do, you're learning the basics of the skills and the knowledge of how to take that project forward.
Even someone could come to college with some base knowledge and a subject.
Could come with zero knowledge and learn.
But they could come with some knowledge though and zero confidence.
Yeah.
So it might not even just be the academic stuff because when I came to college, I thought I was an idiot. I thought I was daft.
Yeah.
And then when I came here, I realised I wasn't. And it was really just all confidence.
Yeah, and I think that stems back to my first time at college as well, because I was at Falkirk College, which is now Forth Valley, but when I went there, I didn't know I was dyslexic, and I found out I was dyslexic, and I always thought I was just illiterate, or unteachable is what I was called by one teacher. And I thought, and it was just that saying that one good person.
Was it? So I know we've kind of gone a wee bit off topic from the original source, but so when I learned I was an addict, it wasn't a burden; it was a relief.
Yeah.
Was that similar for yourself?
Yeah, very much so. Because I always thought I was just stupid, or I thought I was just daft, and just that daft laddie through the scheme that gets in bothered all the time.
And you found that out on your course.
Yeah, I found that because I was really lucky. I had a lecturer called Mrs. Marjorie Banks, and the name always sticks in my head, Mary Marjorie Banks.
Sounds like a Beatles album.
Well, she's actually her grandfather. So where Bathgate, where the old college was in Bathgate, is in Marjorie Banks Street, and that was named after her great grandfather. So that always sticks in my head. And she sat me down and she says, "Go and write me a paragraph." Because they were concerned, because I was like, look, I was quite open with the college. I says, look, I can't read or write. I was kicked out of school at 14. I don't have any. I have one qualification. I had an O grade in art and design, which I could draw at that time for some reason, but can't do it now. And she made me write a paragraph, and she says, you've got a thing called dyslexia. And I was like, God, what's wrong with me? And it's not. It's just... It's hard to explain. Dyslexia, you can write all these medical explanations for it, but dyslexia is so different for different people, and people don't realise that it's not just about the letters moving about the page. It's like I can write something down, and I think it's perfect in here, but when I look at it, it's all spelt wrong, or it's in the wrong order, and then I have to. It's kind of like a puzzle. I have to then unwind that puzzle and then put it in order and get people to check it. And that's a coping strategy, the same as creativity, as then that gave me the ability to read and write, which I'd never really had up to that point. And then I went crazy. I read everything that I could and just absorbed everything because I wasn't getting that at secondary school, and I still feel that happens. I still feel we get students here from secondary school who have never had that opportunity because they don't address their needs at school. They're only interested in having atypical student that passes all their hires and ticks all the boxes for their sorry, I'm going into a rant there.
That's
and I
all
didn't
right.
mean to.
That's what we're here
But
for.
to me, it's really important that we understand things like dyslexia, because that's what does damage your confidence. And I went on after that to become a manager and all different. And I openly tell people I've had 27 jobs, but I've had probably 3 careers in all different areas. But money and career is no the driver for me. Creativity is the driver now. And the last 6 years has been the biggest change in my life ever, because I've been able to be creative and build strategies into my own head to know that I'm good at it. Because if you don't tell yourself you're good at it, nobody else is going to. It's the whole praise thing. I kind of. You went through school, you were never praised for anything. I was actively belted every day at school. I think I probably told you the story. I actually have the belt that gave me the last stroke before they banned the belt. And that just all comes out of just people buying stuff and then saying, oh, do you know what this belt is? I says, aye, that was the belt that gave me the last stroke before they banned it. And it's quite funny, I've got it in a display case in my house. Just as a reminder.
That's another form of creativity.
Yeah, well, it's just a reminder to me that to say that, yeah, all the people put me down, all that part of my life where they should have been really helping me, and they weren't. They were people, to me, they weren't bad people. They were doing their job, but they weren't helping me get to where I needed to be. And that needs to be something that's recognised in all life, that people have got so much promise, so much to give to the world, but you need to give them that chance.
Yeah.
And you can't give them that chance. I know they didn't have dyslexia testing then, but surely somebody could have noticed at that point that where I was failing and done something about it, rather than just letting me leave and not do anything about it. Yeah. So it's a different time, and I know that. I'm old, so I know that was the 80s and the 70s and that. It's like I said to you this morning, my childhood was the 1978 World Cup in Argentina. That's all I remember from my childhood. Yeah. But if I really go into it, I can remember loads more. But to me, that was the starting point. The creativity for me was Archie Gemmell's goal.
So there's loads and loads and loads of stuff, but I'm gonna focus on the part that ties in with the creative stuff, because we could talk all day about loads of it, and it's all really fascinating. But I love the idea that you've still got this belt. And it reminds me, you know the singer Shaggy?
Yeah.
Shaggy, right? Aye. He's got an old box TV, an old broken box TV, in one of the bedrooms of his mansion he lives in. And he says the reason he keeps the old TV is to remind himself that he was broke, to remind himself where he was, to keep himself humble. Yeah. And it's just another form of being creative.
The belt's my driver. It's like I look at that, because that's their symbol of, like, you can't do this. And ever since I've got it, and it's only 6 months ago the person gave me it, and it was like, I was like, do you know what? Every time I get pissed off, I look at that and I think I can do better than what they thought of me. So
defiance.
I've got defiance, but I've also got the resilience to make sure that we carry stuff on and carry projects through, because we can all have great projects, but it's actually delivering them to the end, and that's the whole part of creativity. Is I think the future projects I've got intend to do over the next 3 years are really, really good, and they're really, really exciting. But I know I need people round about me that's going to drive that. And that's what I'm doing now. And that's what we're doing with the film project that I've got, is putting the right people round about me, so that when I do fund it and do all the things that we need to do to get it funded, it will happen and it will have an impact. And that's the whole point of that type of filmmaking, is to have that impact, to tell a social message, to make people more aware and get people engaging with subjects that they don't necessarily would engage with, or they would stigmatise and not engage with it at all. So it's really important, I think. Yeah,
okay, so there's something that stands out to me is that at different stages in your life you can realise that you're creative. And so I want to ask yourself about painting and drawing, because I've always known you as being a creative person, but that side of your creativity is fairly new, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, tell us about
that. Yeah. So basically, I'd been living with my partner, my ex-partner now, for years and years. We've been together for about 6 years. I actually met her when she was studying art here upstairs, and I was doing cookery. So obviously, being in that creative relationship, we'd paint and we'd draw but never like I said to you the other day when in Lithgow, she was drawing this beautiful swan by the loch one day, and a woman stopped and was like, "Oh my God, look at that! That's beautiful. Look at this lady's swan." And the wee kid was like, "Oh yeah, it's beautiful." And she kept walking, and I had started drawing a swan, and then gave up and drew a dodo in a tank. And the woman was like, "Oh, oh," and I was like, "Well, I can't draw. I couldn't really draw. I used to be able to draw. I'd done well at school, and then I just left it by the wayside, took up music instead." But the day we broke up, so I was still living in the flat for about a month after we finished. The very next day, I started drawing in charcoal, and it's when I realised I was like, "Do you know what? This is actually art." And I realised when I drew the face that I'd drawn, and then I filled in the background with charcoal, and I was like, "This looks like an actual proper piece of art." And that was it, day one. And I just kept doing it every single day after that, and every day since. I moved back to my mum's, and then in July I went to see Kiss. And then that night, I drew Gene Simmons in my book, and then painted it, and added all this mad colour and blood with paint. And I was like, "Geez, oh, like this is exactly what it should feel like to make art." And then from there, just literally, I was like, "I'm just going to paint and paint and paint," and I just never stopped.
And that led to you doing the front cover.
And it led to the book. So I'd been painting, I think, for not even long, like 3 or 4 months. When I was finishing my painting, so even halfway through, I'd be like, "This is what I've done. This is what I've done today," and always send Aidan my drafts for approval. And you came to me one day, you were like, "Oh, I've written this book. Like, do you want to read it? Do you want to do the cover on it?" And I said, "Well, I send it over."
It started off right because I believe in visualization. So it started off. I just wanted a cover to visualize. I didn't even know at that point that we were going to connect our creative journeys together. I was just like, "We send me something to visualize." So I can like imagine seeing it in like Waterstones or something.
And I said, "Well, I need to read the book to be able to visualise how I see it." And I remember getting it. So he'd sent it by email, and I was in Lidl when I got the message, and I opened it up. The first page I read, I was like, "Holy shit!" And I just closed it again and forgot about it. I put it to the side because I read literally the first page.
You need to give context as to why.
Yes, the first page is brutal.
Graphic.
It is brutal. The first page of the book, and I was like, I had no idea. We've been friends for like 25 years, and I had no idea what was going on. So I put it to the side and kind of forgot about it. And then eventually you were like, "Where's this cover, man?" And I was like, "Right, so I need to read the book." And I read it in about 6 hours. And then I sat down at my desk and I drew the cover in black and white and ink. Like crying my eyes out, drawing this picture. And sent you the very first picture. And you were like, "There you go, that's it."
Well, I said, so like I said, I was.
And sometimes that all connects. That's the whole thing. Like you're saying, you're connecting your creativity, but you're reading his creative, what he's created on the page, and then you're putting it into the art, and that's the collaborations are so effective, and they're so.
It also led to things though, right, that we never intended, because initially I knew Mark was doing drawing and stuff, and that's why I was talking about when do people realise they're creative, because I think that you knew you were creative before I did, but you didn't know about that side of your creativity until later on. I only discovered, I always loved writing, I loved poetry, but growing up in Ladywell as a kid, you didn't admit you liked poetry. I loved Kurt Cobain, I loved Eminem, I didn't tell nobody about the poetry. It was only after my granny passed away in my most recent spell of recovery, which I'm still in obviously, I started to write. And I had the manuscript and I wanted the cover to visualise, and when I saw the front cover, it was like, I just said to him, I said, "That's the front cover." I mean, the publisher made them draw an R30 just to be sure.
Do you know what the worst thing is, right? So when I drew the cover, so I wrote, the book was called Never Quite Done to start with, and I wrote it in big red letters on an A3 sheet and paint, and then drew the cover over it.
Yeah.
And then she was like, "Oh, I like it, but can you do me, say like 30 more?" I was like, "Are you serious?" So I did. I just done them. I sat one whole day and drew all these pictures, and then she was like, "I actually really like the first one, eh?" I was like, "What?"
Which was the one that we loved.
But it was the one that had the paint behind it as well, so I had to then go in Photoshop and edit out all the red, which took another couple of hours, but it was worth it. And I think the many people that have been like, "Oh, the covers like what caught my eye," or like that, really, when you read the book, shows exactly like the two sides of the person that's in the book, which I thought was a cool compliment.
Something I wanted, the reason this though, it ties into everything you were saying as well about things connecting and stuff. And then doing like, because I'm going to ask you in a minute about your film project, because you're talking about this reaching people. So it's not only a coping mechanism for you, it becomes then material to be consumed by other people that they can identify with and get some coping from. But I said to Mark recently, I was like, if I hadn't asked you to do the front cover that day, this charity wouldn't exist. The charity scheme wouldn't be a thing, because we didn't realise until that moment that our two creative paths could come together. And then we've gone on and on and on, and here we are, we've got a charity that both meets the needs of us of being creative and helping other people, but it's now going to serve the public.
And if you go back even further than that, the origin story to all of this, I had my music page on Facebook, right? And I was trying to grow the audience, and I was getting nowhere, man. I had like 300 likes after about 6 years, right? And this same picture of Jeff Goldblum Facebook page was like appearing every day. I'd see it every single day. And there was like 500,000 likes on this page, right? And I posted about it on Facebook. I was like, this is a joke.
You have to explain a little bit about it. So the page is called The Same Pictures of Jeff Goldblum Every Day, and it's the exact same photo, and they post it every day.
Religiously at the same time.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, this page has got that many followers and that many likes.
He was raging.
I was really angry about it, man.
And all they're doing is manipulating. That's all they're doing. So.
And he started tagging me in it every single day, the same picture every day. And it started off as a joke. And I was like, this is like, get out, like, go away, basically.
Yeah.
And then every day it happened, and every day then for 6 years it happened on the bounce, every single day for 6 years.
Yeah.
But it meant we were talking every day, and we were then on WhatsApp every day, like,
so you're
chatting.
communicating,
Aye, and it started that whole thing. And then that's when, obviously through that, and through talking on WhatsApp every day, then we got to the art. So we wouldn't be here. This charity wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for Jeff Goldblum. And that same
and
picture
there's irony in that, because
now
I understand as a creative, we're talking about before we came on the podcast, we were talking about trying to grow a following and stuff. So him as a musician, and I've always said he's the most talented guy I've ever met, like in so many different ways. But I just found it funny that he was really angry because there was this page that just kept posting the same picture, and they had a massive following because everyone loved the irony of it. And I just thought, I'm going to have to tag him in that now. And not only that, your partner who you're with now, you've got together through that tagging thing as well.
Yeah,
so it just led to everything. Really.
Yeah.
Jeff
Goldblum's
he's to blame for
everything. Office.
Honestly, I'd known her before, like years and years ago, but obviously we were both away with different people. And then she messaged me on Instagram a picture of a Jeff Goldblum shower curtain, and she was like, "Hi, I know this is really weird, but I can see you and your pal tagging each other and talking about Jeff Goldblum every single day." I forget people see it, so obviously people are tagging it, talking about us all the time. And she was like, "I just thought it'd be funny. I thought you'd enjoy it and all that." And that's what started it. And now here we are, like 2 years later.
And you know what? It came full circle because that page shut down a week before the scheme went full time.
Yeah,
literally.
And we're like,
right before the scheme
Jeff took
started.
us all the way here, man. So
must have knew the scheme's made it now. Let's just cut it. Let's just end it there.
Honestly, if it wasn't for Jeff Goldblum, my life would be totally different. Like 100. I honestly mean that. We've spoke about it being like a higher power moment, where if it wasn't for that page and how stupid it is, my page has grown.
Yeah.
And my art following's grown, and obviously we've done the book, we've got the charity now. I've got a new family.
It's
you know what I mean?
It's like moments, isn't it? It's like
literally my whole life's changed because of stupid Facebook page.
So it brings you back round to your film. I'm curious as to what your film's going to be about, even if it's just theoretical at the moment.
The narrative's kind of there for the film. Obviously myself and Mark is going to work on it, and I know you're going to help with it as well. And we have got like Alan Cope and Jim, who Alan's going to do the writing, because that's a thing obviously I kind of struggle at, and I know you want to help with that as well. And other people like kind of putting a whole host of people together. Even got my foundation apprenticeship who's doing nothing in the summer. I'll come and work as a runner for you. It's like great. It gives them experience. They're going on to do stuff in film and TV. So yeah, the project itself is based around the narrative of a trans girl, teenage trans girl in West Lothian committing suicide, and it's going to be all about the repercussions for the family, the school. Why pick this subject? I have a trans kid myself, so it's kind of I kind of understand it. I think now better than I ever done. It's took me 2 years to kind of get my head around just my kid being trans, but it's not just the trans angle, it's the whole teenage suicide thing. It's something that's not being talked about, it's something that is happening, and the whole point of the film is to build up not just a full work of one completed work. It'll break down into 20-minute sections, 10-minute sections that can be shown in the schools. so it can be shown and then discussed in schools. Because I feel that it's not done now. No matter what schools say in this area, nothing's talked about in teenage suicide. It gets paid lip service when it does happen, because it's like we only deal with it after something happens. Let's not be reactive. Let's be proactive about these. These are social issues that we need to, and it's not just about engaging. It's about educating our kids not to take their lives, and it's really important. It's not just going to show the effects of what the suicide has. It's going to show the lead up to the suicide. So my kid tells me every day that they're abused at school. Continue. Imagine going to school and every day you're asked about your sex. I'm going to be really blatant about it, about your organs, about this, about how you feel about being a tranny, or about go kill yourself because you don't even know who you are. Or this is what I hear when I go in at night. So to me, that can only be addressed. People that do that type of bullying don't even realise they're doing it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Just,
sure.
Yeah. This is why I think art is so powerful. Do you feel art is one of the? Well, tell me why you think art, because obviously you do. Why do you think art is one of the vital ways to educate people on subjects like this?
Because it opens the subject up to discussion. Show them an image, show them a film that invokes conversation, because communication is the only way that we deal with these situations. It's not about dealing with them. We'll never eradicate. There'll always be teenage suicide. Okay, I'm not going to say it's not going to cure.
This is specific to trans experiences.
Yeah, to trans experiences, but it's also specific to any kid who's bullied in school that leads to the point that they take their life. Because we should not be, as adults, as being adults in the community, we shouldn't be allowing this to happen, but we should also be educating the people around about it, so that because the people who call my trans girl all that they call her don't go home at night thinking, yeah, I've achieved something, I've made Ally Robertson feel terrible today. They don't have a second thought about it, because it's said without consequence, because we live in a world without consequences, because people can go on the internet and troll anybody without consequences. And that's why our kids today are now learning that we can be like that towards people, because they're villainised in the media.
See, when you're making this film, if you've got so I always ask people like to think beyond your wildest dreams. What would be beyond your wildest dreams for the film? What would be a good
for
outcome?
It to be recognised and used in schools.
And whose perspective would you want the audience to see from?
The child's, the teenager's perspective. And that's why Bunny and Bunny's friend, who's a trans boy, Zipper, is going to come on board, and they're going to be the advisors. Mm-hmm. They're not going to act in it. They
That's
could
powerful.
easily act
That's
in
really
it, but
powerful
they're
to be informed by lived experience, to have people who know what it's like to experience that, to inform the art that you're going to be making.
And they'll give their view of it, because their view of it should be what the children see, because they don't need to see some adult telling them that this is wrong and you shouldn't be doing it. They need to see it from their peers, because that's what's wrong. There's no communication. So if somebody is allowed to abuse somebody all day and have no consequences for it, because they're only using the spoken word and nobody can prove it, doesn't mean it's right. It just means it's wrong. And the only way you can, if to me, I sat down the other night and I really thought about it, and I said to myself, for all the effort I know I'm going to have to put into this, and the effort I know I've got to do to find the money to do this, what is the best outcome of this? And it would be that one kid would watch it and change their mind. And that's, to me, that's what creativity is all about. That's what sparks that. It's the communication then that educates beyond that. It's the opening up that discussion. But also the section of kids, and it's not just that one teenage section, it's aimed at, they'll start to understand that it's not right to bully. It's not right to harass somebody. And that we don't, I'm not saying the teachers don't do it, but I've been in high schools, and all teachers do is shout at pupils to no run in the corridor. There's been a teacher standing there when my kid's been abused, and they've not done nothing about it, because they are scared of the consequences of them pulling off a bully. So to me, all that's got to be shown. There's other parts to the narrative, and it's all mostly family driven. A little known fact that is 33.9% of all trans kids, if they're not supported by their family, commit suicide. God,
is that like Scotland or UK, or is that
worldwide? Worldwide.
That's a really scary figure.
That's a scary figure. And that figure, if you don't support, I mean, as a parent, I tread eggshells every day. Then I'm not going to lie. It's took me nearly a year and a half to nearly 2 years to go from non-binary to transition. And all these things change in your life, and it's really hard to, then you have to appreciate that everything you say in your house could be taken with offence, which sounds really daft, but then I have to start second checking myself. And Bunny will say to me, Dad, I don't mind you say he, because you've always known me as a he, so it takes time to change that. And that's the whole thing about changing attitudes, I think. It's if I can change my attitude, everybody can change their attitude. Yeah. Everybody should, if your kid's non-binary or your kids, you should be supporting your kid regardless of their decisions of their gender and the way that they want to live. I told Bunny, if they hadn't said, Bunny says, at 8-year-old, I wanted to tell you I wanted to have Barbies, and I couldn't do that because you're this big masculine, bearded rugby player. And I said, but if you came and said to me, I would have understood. And we could have then started all this process. Now I'm starting a process of them transitioning when they're 15. And believe it or not, there's so many things stand against them. So now Bunny's voice is broken. We can't alter that. Because before you would have been able to take, if he'd have came earlier, they would have been taken blood. And I'd said, he there. She came to me earlier. She could have been on blockers for a year earlier. That would have stopped her voice breaking. And she would have then been able to go into the Prostogen delivery system, which will change her physically. And I didn't know this. I'm just a dad. You see what I mean? So there's a whole process in there that I didn't quite understand myself, and I had to get my head around that. But these kids at school don't see that. They don't see all the and it's almost torture at times, believe me. But then there's the benefits of it that I know my kid's going to grow up knowing who they are. Yeah. And what really swung it for me, and I think I didn't see you guys that day, was Bunny's first Pride. And I was outside, and Jackie, the principal, came over and spoke to her, and it was so good because she actually felt that she was with her people. And it's not just being with, it's just being accepted. And so if you imagine going through your life that you're not accepted every day, but not by your family, but not by people in Pride, but by the people who are your peers.
Yeah, the only thing I can identify that back, I don't know anything about what it's like to go through a trans experience or non-binary or anything like that. The only thing I can relate it to is when I first started going to recovery meetings and seeing other addicts and feeling like I wasn't alone with that experience. Were you going to make a point earlier, or is there something?
I was going to say a couple of things. So I think the movie's important. Obviously, you said about from the kids' perspective, but I think it would have an impact on both sides of the fence as well.
Yeah.
So obviously, from the perspective of somebody who's going through that and experiencing the changes in themselves, and then from the bully's perspective, seeing that and being like, oh, do you know what? Actually, like this is the impact that I'm having.
Yeah.
And I think as well, the other point I was going to make is that it's a very British thing, I think.
Yeah.
To push things to the side and pretend it doesn't happen. Or do you know what I mean? Like brush things under the rug. It's happened for years and years and years and years.
Keep calm and carry on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like think of like in the 80s when AIDS was a massive pandemic and they were like, nah, like it doesn't matter. It's always been a British thing.
Yeah.
And here we are. Still, we were saying earlier on about the media. Like the media's got a big part to play in demonising people.
Yeah, and very much so. And that's happening with trans people now because they don't fit in with the norm, or they don't. And the arguments that the media is putting over are very valid, but at the same time, if they're addressing likes of these people who are convicted of rape and things like that, it's down to the law to address these things, not the media. So they should be building in equality laws. That's just recognising what sex means in law. I read that the other day and I was like, So from the gender reform bill, we went 10 steps back to now sorting the equality bill, because if we didn't fix that in the first place, the gender reform bill could never have happened. But it didn't fit in with right-wing politics. It doesn't fit in with... It was used as well by both sides, and I'm not going to say that it's not, because the SNP used it as a vehicle as well to really change the way that they do stuff as well. So I'm a great supporter of the Gender Reform Act, and then if anybody asks me why, it's purely personal, for my child's benefit, because I see the problems I'm having because that bill's not in place now. Because I can't get Bunny a bank account. I can't change Bunny's sex on a passport, so Bunny can't travel until they're 18. So imagine you're told that you can't go anywhere because you can't change that. You can't change a passport photo. You can't get a bank account for your kid.
So these points,
yeah.
I wanted to question.
Sorry, I'm going off track there, but these are
we're
valid
we're on
points.
track
because,
actually, because I think that the original question was about the film.
Yeah.
And even this podcast, someone might watch this and say, oh, I didn't understand any of that. I didn't understand that experience from a father's point of view or the child's point of view.
Yeah, definitely.
So the creativity we're having now opens up discussion about things we need to be speaking about.
Exactly.
And I'll think back to just thinking about creativity as a way of education, about anything happening in society. I think about race as a subject. And the first time I was ever aware of racial inequality was watching Boys in the Hood, a film called Boys in the Hood. Or listening to Dr. Dre rap, or Ice Cube rap, or NWA, the band that they were in. That was the first, and it was stuff that was happening in America, but there was also stuff happening in the UK. But that was creativity. That was an art form that allowed someone who didn't understand that experience to get a looking glass in and understand from someone else's perspective. So the reason I think the film will be so powerful is because even stuff you were saying there, I didn't know about. There were things I've just learned, and that's because you've got the knowledge and I don't. And the creative space allows other people in. And I would always hope that creativity allows for more compassion and empathy and more tolerance. And I think about...
I think that comes through the education as well.
Education for sure, but even the creative industry is still behind the times, I would say. So I write stuff that's very... to look at, it's brutal, because it's about addiction, it's about broken relationships, it's about trauma and violence and all that. But really see what I'm writing about, is really know that stuff.
Yeah.
It's all the stuff behind it. It's the trauma and the social deprivation, the mental health and the lack of confidence and the broken social structures, and then it manifests itself like that. So I've got like a second book that my agent's trying to get a deal for me for. And we've had some really great feedback on it, but one publisher actually said they were terrified of it. And that's because they looked at the violence and the drug taking and the broken relationship, and they didn't see the stuff behind it all. So bringing it back to the original point, I think your film is going to be very powerful, and I think necessary, and I think really relevant. How are you going to fund doing that? That's the question, huh?
Well, I already started. So I had a really good conversation with Hannah Burdell at your launch night, which was quite good. And she said, get it all put together. We'll have a wee meeting and I'll introduce you to somebody at Channel 4 who was head of diversity at Channel 4. So you always use your contacts. And I kind of knew Hannah in the past, and I've met her at exhibitions. She trains with my wife at the gym. So it was a kind of good conversation. And she says, I explained it because I was talking about the narrative while in Cope at the time, and she was kind of in that conversation. But then there's quite a lot of funding streams that we can use. I got an offer the other day from a person in America to fund it to the tune of £100,000, which I'm still very dubious about. But do you know what I mean?
Take it if they offer it. Take it.
If it comes through as hard cash, I'll take it. And that was as a gift, believe it or not. There was no financial gain for the person. Otherwise, they just love the narrative, and they're a millionaire, and they kind of they're philanthropic that kind of way. So but I really want to. The way I kind of work is I want everybody who works on it gets paid. That's always been my kind of ethos. If I kind of do something, I want to be at the point now that's done professionally and people get paid for it. And I also want it to be it's a passion project for me, but I want the people who are involved to understand the passion behind it, because it is about teaching and educating and engaging, getting teenagers to engage with this subject, because it's not just the trans, it's not just the suicide part. We've lost this engagement with our community coming through. So I do actively in my community, I speak to everybody. I'm a blather, I'm not going to lie. I tell everybody I meet, if you get away with me for 5 minutes, you're doing really well, because either that or I didn't really like you. So,
Oh, you must like us a lot.
so I must like you a lot. So,
Can I just, there's another point and I just want to get it out there because I'm conscious of time as well, and I would like us to finish on creative influences.
Yeah.
But we talked about the media, right? Diluting or distorting or cherry picking subjects and stretching them out to suit their own agenda. What I think is amazing about the creative process is we can take the control back.
Yeah.
And we can tell the story as we know it to be.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's a drugs-related death crisis in Scotland, and for a long time the media would have the addict as the villain and the social deviant.
Yeah.
When I'm writing material that says, all right, we're not going to deny we've done things wrong, but there are broken social structures that have been there for generations that create
it's
this social problem.
institutionalised now.
Yeah. And what you're doing as well is you can cut through all the media narratives with your film, and you can tell the story as you know it to be, with the guidance from people who have lived it.
Yeah.
You're coming from the father's perspective, and then you've got your child's perspective. Way time coming, I think we're down to the last 10 minutes or so. I just wanted to ask you both creative influences. Who doesn't matter what their creative background is, who's your creative influence? Or any creative influence.
It's really hard to talk about in art terms.
It could be any influence then that influences your creativity, if you want to word it like that.
I think just people I surround myself with, really.
Yeah.
In terms of art, obviously, I spent a long time with an artist, like a tattooer, and became part of that bubble. So I was surrounded by art all the time, every day. But growing up, my mum was quite artistic. She wrote like amazing short stories and poetry. She plays music, she plays keyboard and a bunch of other stuff. My dad wasn't. He was a good cook, but that's as far as his creativity went. My friends, I've got a lot of older friends who were into music growing up. Like one of my good friends he was a drummer in the Forces, and he's literally the best rock drummer I've ever been in the presence of. So that's pretty cool. And I think through music and through that influence, he influenced my taste in music with Paul Simon and like with Bon Jovi were the two biggest bands or artists like growing up. That influenced my music, which in turn then influenced my art, because I went from Paul Simon backwards to like music from the 60s onwards. And then it's when I found cannabis, when I was into all that kind of music, and that influenced my art as well. Because I tried to use it as like a creative tool almost. So I think that kind of music had a bigger influence on my art than my actual music. But yeah, I think that's where it all stemmed from, is like going way back in time and using music as like a stimulus for the art that I created. Obviously, you call it Lynchian.
That's what
it's very
context.
Lynchian. I never thought of that.
For context, with he's never watched a David Lynch film.
Yeah, I know.
Right, so for anyone who might watch this, David Lynch has done Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive and a whole bunch of stuff that to some people is nonsensical and makes no sense. And well, that's what nonsensical means. It makes no sense. And it can be really frustrating. And other people watch it and call it like art form and tell it. But some of the stuff that he paints is very Lynchian and very twisted and dark. And it's funny because I think your work's Lynchian and you've never watched anything by David Lynch.
I don't know where that influence comes from. Like literally, I find it interesting making art like that sparks conversation. I've got a lot of influence in religion, I think. Like I've had.
But you're not a religious fellow.
Aye. So I'm not religious in any way. I used to be quite religious, and then when I lost it, I became quite bitter about it. I think about religion in a lot of ways, and I think that's a lot of like the satire I do, or like the religious satire I think that's in my paintings comes from that. Subconsciously, like I never made the decision to one day be like, oh, I'm going to paint like the Maid on a Cross when I did, because I was like, this is the art speaks for itself. But there's a lot of them like
I just clicked. I've been talking to you about New Orleans, and that picture I told you was very New Orleans.
Aye. We were speaking about it.
I'll need to come back to this at a later date. I keep New Orleans keeps popping up in my life, and I take that as a higher power sign that I'm going to end up going there or something, and then we're going to end up on a trip anyway.
I'm excited.
That's for another
That's
day.
it. That'd be
But,
it. That's a road trip for the scheme.
Who's funding that one?
I'll see if I've got a rich benefactor in America.
There's a piece that we've spoke about using since I painted it, and this is during lockdown, so May 2020, when I painted it, the big blue guy with like he's got like octopus art, like tentacles and all that kind of stuff. And this was like from day one, he was like, oh, that's gonna be the cover for book 2. And that's got religious iconography as well. Like it's got halo, and he's bright blue. It looks like he's out his marbles. But that's like obviously that's again it's like.
Whereas I looked,
all the way
we'll need to put links to these pictures, right? Because this picture I don't see religion. I see a guy out his tree in the living room,
right?
And but very trancy.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about my influences, right? Eminem and Kurt Cobain were the first two.
Good role models.
I felt like Eminem was like a modern poet, and what I loved about both of them was they took their pain and their suffering and their emotions and their disillusions with society and turned it into just the most amazing lyrics and music. And so I wrote poetry all the time, and it was bringing it back to the subject. It was a coping mechanism for me. It was to stop me killing myself at times. I was really suicidal in high school. And I wrote poems and didn't tell anyone because as a wee boy in Ladywell, Livingston, you got battered for it.
Exactly.
You got battered for it. As I've gotten older, I've been really influenced by filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino. And the reason I love Tarantino is because I think he's brave enough to do things his way.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been brave enough to do things his way. And when you hear him do talks about it, he'll say to film students that, when he talks to film students and teaches them, he says, I want to watch your film, but you haven't made it yet. You haven't made the film yet, and I want to watch it. And it's kind of like we were talking about any person that creates art. Well, that's never been done before until you create it. You're the first person in the world to do it. It's totally unique. It doesn't exist until you create it. And so people like that really influence me. But my sort of well of resources comes from the streets I grew up in. And it's funny because I grew up in Ladywell until I was 14, and I love Ladywell with all my heart. But also came with a lot of harsh realities. My parents moved me to Ealyburn when I was 14, which is to some a more developed area and a less harsh environment. Yet all my creative sort of sources are from those first 14 years. I go back to those first 14 years all the time. I go to Ladywell all the time to walk around, to feel at peace, to feel at home,
it's your home,
and to get my inspiration. And my next piece of work, hopefully it will get published at some point. There's different titles for the book it could possibly be called. One of them's the Lost Boys of Ladywell. And it's crazy how you can live in a place for 14 years and it still has so much of a pull on you and so much of an influence on your life. So what about yourself?
Your formative years.
We'll finish on your creative influences.
My creative influence is God. I don't know.
For a second there I thought it said your creative influence was God.
God, no, it's not God.
Me too, man. Me too.
He came second. Photography. I love Alan McGregor's stuff. He was my lecturer. His stuff in Callanish up in the Standing Stones is just stunning. When you actually see what went into it and how he got the images that he done, and I printed his life's work. He's done this life exhibition that's about he's visited every place in the European Union, and it's all about. It's hard to explain. So he's took photographs because I know the narrative, so it really stands out to me. So it's a photograph taken in a certain place, but could be any other place in the world. Sounds really daft, but see when you see it all together, and that really stood out to me because it's never been shown anywhere yet. But I had the delight of printing it for him, and it was really quite doing something back for somebody who gave me so much. Mainstream photography, I like Fan Ho, who's a Hong Kong photographer. Really, black and white photography is my thing. So if you ever see my stuff, most of my stuff's in black and white. I don't know why. It's just I love black and white. Evokes textures rather than colour evokes emotion, kind of thing.
It's quite nostalgic, I think, as well.
Yeah, the tonal qualities a black and white image has to be seen properly. And you can only get that with.
I think it makes it timeless as well. Almost.
Yeah. But then I watched a programme the other day on the TV, and the way the colour grading was done, it was made to look like portrait film for the 50s. It was just amazing, beautifully shot. Hard one with films because I like so many.
What stands out, if I ask you right now, what stands out?
Biggest film I would probably say to me is The Godfather.
Yes, I keep telling this guy to watch more gangster films.
I didn't like
The Godfather just because Goodfellas was my favourite, and then I kind of went back and watched Francis Ford Coppola's really version of Goodfellas as The Godfather. It's just a same narrative but a different story. But
Goodfellas is more 80s, right?
Yeah, Goodfellas is like that
it feels
60s film, and it's back in. But it's hard. I would probably say, and I'm going to go off the wall here, I would say my favourite films are Star Wars films.
Well, I don't
Just
know
because
that
I
that's
grew
off.
up-
I don't
Yeah.
think that's off the wall. I think that's quite a popular film
Yeah.
franchise.
Sorry, I've just knocked my mic off. Just right
That's
at
all
the
right.
very
That's
end.
all good.
But I do like Star Wars films because when I was 7-year-old, I went to see Star Wars with my dad, and I tricked him into thinking it was a John Wayne film. Just had a
How
fancy
did you manage
title.
that?
Well, he didn't know what Star Wars was. He says it's a John Wayne film, and if you went like that, he would take you in the picture. So 10 minutes in, he leaned over to me, and my dad was this big, huge guy in my life. He was a professional boxer. He'd done loads of stuff in his life, and I kind of think that's why I'm like that. And he leant over and he goes, "I'm never taking you to the cinema again. What's this crap? Where's the horses?"
Flying through
He's all
space.
like this, and I always remember that, always stuck in my mind. And I've seen every single Star Wars film on the day they've came out in the cinema. And it's something that's just, it takes you out of this world, and I kind of really like that. And that's my phone. So, Airwolf.
This is the comedy part of the podcast.
So this is the comedy part, and we can cut this out because there we go.
No, I think we should leave that in,
We
Ali.
can leave that
We're not
in.
getting away with that.
Also, television-wise, I loved Airwolf. That's why that was there. No.
My phone's got a 5-minute warning. We've got 6
Yeah,
minutes of that.
6 minutes.
Remember Jerry Springer?
Yeah.
Jerry Springer always had a final thoughts. Right?
Final thought.
I'm going to ask him for his
Yeah,
final thoughts
Right,
before your theme tune comes on again.
glad you came back to me because I've been thinking about the inspiration, right? The influence, and there is one that really, I was thinking about it and I was like, that's actually it. When I was wanting to paint or I wanted to create art, I was searching YouTube for ages and I came across a video that's Jim Carrey, and it's Jim Carrey, I Need Colour. And it talks about when he was going through his deepest depressions and what he needed to get through it. And it's just him throwing masses of paint on canvas and creating these big, mad, Lynchian looking pieces, man. And that's exactly where it came from. Me wanting to be like, I just needed to get that out and be an artist. And that's exactly where it came from. So that's my final thought, is that my actual biggest influence is Jim Carrey.
And Jim Carrey's interesting because he often says that the biggest character he's ever played is Jim Carrey.
Carrey, exactly, yeah.
And that's kind of like philosophical stuff, man, that blows my mind.
He does all that. He's a mad guy, man. I think he's a literal genius, like the way he works. His art, his movies, the Andy Kaufman thing, I think in particular.
Andy Kaufman, have you seen that? Oh, it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
amazing.
There's a documentary on Netflix
Yeah,
where Jim
seen
Carrey
it.
talks about, it's
Yeah,
recent.
talks about Andy
no,
Kaufman.
And
He was
it
amazing.
shows you
He
him
was
staying in
amazing
character the whole
comedy,
time
yeah.
to the point he was actually pissing people off doing it.
Yeah.
But he was that committed to it, man, and I respected that. There's another documentary. I'll get to your final thoughts after my final thoughts, right? My final thoughts are, when I was sitting trying to think, is the book stuff going to work? Will I become an author? All the dreams I had, I watched the Defiant Ones on Netflix, and this is about Dr. Dre, going from hip hop street rapper to a complete billionaire from selling all his stuff to Apple.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most inspiring things I ever watched. And I just remember thinking, if he can do all that, there's no reason a lad for the scheme like me can't go on and achieve what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
And again, the first time I ever really learned about race was through listening to Dr. Dre or seeing films like American History X and stuff. So to see this guy as a rapper who also discovered Eminem, if anyone doesn't know that, he discovered Eminem. He gave Eminem his big break when everyone told him not to. Everyone told Dr. Dre not to because it was a mistake, and it turned out to be the biggest success that you could have ever achieved. So my final thoughts are is that if someone like Dr. Dre or anyone else that you can look up to can start somewhere humble and lead to where they have, then anybody can. Ali, I'll let you finish with your final thoughts.
Final thoughts, probably I always talk about my dad, so it's probably something my dad said to me before he died. He said to me, always be who you want to be, never what anybody else thinks you are.
I think
that just sticks with me all my
I
life.
think that's beautiful because it also that ties in perfectly with the film you're going to make.
Yeah. So that's my final
beautiful.
thought on it.
Thanks very much.
No bother.
You've been Ally and we've been two lads for this game.
Two lads for this game.
Cheers.
Tell me something that